Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. EU and African Union leaders have ended a two-day summit in Luanda, Angola, where talks centred on two urgent issues: Africa's mineral extraction and rising migration, while both sides discussed how to secure resources fairly and manage migration pressures. It's still unclear whether the meeting will lead to real change in the partnership. Our Africa correspondent, Sofia has been following the summit. Sofia, great to see you, and it looks gorgeous where you are. How was the summit?
Hello, Ashim. It's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. How was the summit?
The summit was amazing. A lot of very key leaders were here. A lot of important topics were actually discussed regarding the future of the relationship between Africa and Europe.
And what were the main issues? You see, because you have 26 EU countries, you've got 55 African Union countries. I mean, that's a lot of countries all in one place. I can't imagine it would have been easy identifying clear issues to discuss or coming to any kind of consensus. What were they mainly talking about?
Well, Ashim, it is important to actually start by reminding the theme of this year's summit, which is promoting peace and prosperity through effective multilateralism. Why it's important to remind that topic is because it's perfectly aligned with the first topic that was discussed yesterday, which is the situation in Ukraine. Before the summit even kicked off, some EU states head of states and government had an informal meeting and they discussed the situation in Ukraine. We actually were lucky enough to have a statement from Prime Minister of Poland, Mr. Donald Tusk, who told us during the press conference that the EU stays united regarding the fight for peace in Ukraine. He had a lot of important exchanges with EU leaders such as the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Ursula von der Leyen, or even Antonio Costa. So that was one of the main topics that was discussed yesterday, and it was very important for EU leaders to discuss that topic here in Africa, as it aligns perfectly with the theme of this year.
Understood. Now, you say that this was on the sidelines. What was the opinion of the African Union countries on Ukraine?
So the African countries are in support of peace, even though the discussion is ongoing. It's aligned with the theme of today, of this summit, which is promoting peace and prosperity. We can touch on other topics that were discussed. For example, today, two very important topics were also discussed, like migration and the exploitation of minerals here in Africa. When you think about migration, European leaders and African leaders have two different views on that topic, but are not opposite to one another, which is promising, because we can actually believe that the work in progress will lead to a consensus. You have the African leaders who are asking for a fair treatment of their citizens when they actually migrate, and you have EU leaders who are focused on the fight against illegal immigration, and they are asking for the help of the African governments to actually control that issue.
And what was the response? Because clearly those two issues, fair treatment, I assume when you say fair treatment, I assume you're talking about fair treatment when being allowed visas to enter into Europe, and the issue of illegal migration. I mean, there is a tension between them. Where do you think the common ground might be between these two groups on controlling illegal migration and moving towards a fairer treatment of visa issuance?
So we can assume, Ashim, that this is the reason why I mentioned that the two issues are not actually opposite with one another, and they can actually go together, because fighting for fair treatment when the immigration is legal is totally doable, and the help for fighting illegal immigration is doable at the same time. So with a great understanding between the two different continents, we can get to a common ground, and it's actually a great work in progress right now.
Understood. Were there any next steps agreed about this particular topic?
It's still a work in progress right now about immigration. You know, it's a very hot topic, and it has been for years. But the leaders that were here during this summit are really committed to finding common ground and to help each other with the different priorities. And we can even also say that for other topics like the exploitation of African minerals and African resources. It is also a hot topic that we're discussing today. Why is it a hot topic? Because on one hand, you have African leaders who are fighting for a change of vision. They do not want Africa to be seen as only a source of exploitation for the minerals and the resources on one hand. And the EU also wants to continue a partnership where they can actually collaborate on that exploration and that exploitation, keeping in mind that they do have different people who also are interested in the resources of Africa. You have China, you have the United States, and you even have Russia. So the competition is actually really here. So the EU was very open today to listening to the demands or the requirements, we can say, of African leaders about that particular topic. And interestingly enough, Ashim, you have Poland, who is actually now in works with Uganda for a new partnership and a new collaboration on the exploitation of resources like
Sofia, I want to come to that.
cobalt.
I want to come to the Polish element in just 1 second. But before we get there, I want to explore a little bit more about the so-called exploitation of mineral resources across Africa. And understandably, of course, African countries don't want to be seen simply as a mineral resource, but as part of a partnership. What do they envisage as that partner? What's the other side of that partnership, if you like?
So the other side of that partnership is really for the EU is to keep collaborating with African countries for their resources. But they did mention that they are renewing their commitment for Vision 2030. And a part of the commitment for Vision 2030 is actually really collaborating together for a win-win situation, a win-win partnership, which would take revising and reviewing the partnership that has been in place for years. So right there, you can see that it's a work in progress, and it's promising because the EU heads are actually agreeing to revisit those partnerships where maybe Africa has felt like they were seen as only a source of exploitation for the resources. Understanding that, we can actually think that it will be changed, and the Vision 2030 is all for that.
Well, certainly, as you started to say, there has been already some investment, Poland being an example from the European Union, and Poland has invested 4 billion zloty into Africa. Do you see this as part of a general trend towards greater investment in business in Africa by European countries?
Definitely, Ashim. Definitely, Ashim. Let's take that example for a second. When I was talking about earlier, the new partnership that is growing between Uganda, for example, and Poland. So the Ugandan authorities and the Polish authorities have agreed on the collaboration on the exploration of certain resources in Uganda, like copper and cobalt. The new agreement is that those resources will be processed in Uganda first before they are taken to Poland, which is a new type of partnership that is going towards that win-win partnership that we've been talking about. So it is promises. As well, Ashim, when you talk about business is booming here in the Angola. We met actually today with some business owners, some Polish business owners that have been living here for 15 years, and they are doing amazing work. They are building houses, they are promoting different things like a better quality of life, and they are calling other investors to come invest here in places like Angola. I mean, Angola is one of the fastest growing country economically and business-wise here in Africa. And they assure us that the momentum is now for investors to invest and to actually also give back with another type of investment, which requires a win-win partnership.
Certainly. Now, clearly, it seems as though now is, as you say, now is the time for European businesses to start investing even more in Africa. Are there resources, I mean, other than energy resources, so for example, rare earth metals and so on as well that were discussed?
Can you repeat that, Ashim?
Yes. Apart from resources for energy, so clearly, I mean, Angola has oil, as do many other African countries. But apart from energy resources, coal resources and so on, were there other resources such as rare earth minerals also discussed as part of the investment, that might take place?
Well, actually, resources were discussed in general. As we know, I mean, Africa is a continent that really is rich in resources. So resources and minerals were discussed in general. And I think that when Africa talks about a partnership where it's a win-win partnership with the resources, they are talking about all types of different resources. So it was more a matter of a general consensus about the resources of Africa.
Understood. Now, I'd like to go back to something else that you mentioned earlier, and that is, Africa is attracting a great deal of attention from Russia, from China, from Turkey as well. How is that game playing out? What was your sense at the summit of the interest of those other countries?
So the sense is that, first of all, on one hand, like I mentioned before, European countries are very aware that we can say, quote unquote, the competition is well here in Africa. I mean, you have China that has been present in Africa for many years right now, and who are collaborating with different African countries, a different type maybe of collaboration than we knew before. And also, we know what's happening in the Sahel with Russia and certain African countries that are building relationships. So being aware of that, the European leaders do propose to establish a new common ground between Africa and Europe. And we have to remind that Europe is actually, even though the competition is here, Europe is one of the oldest partners of Africa. So there's definitely history there, but the will is to actually change that history, that maybe make it more of a win-win situation for Africa.
What was your sense again? From the side of the African leaders, were they open to discussion? Were they looking forward to cooperating with the European Union, perhaps over countries like China and Russia, or didn't they really mind? I mean, they were willing to deal with everybody.
So that's a very good question, Ashim, because I believe that African countries are more than ever open to collaboration. Now, the trick is which collaboration will give the better win-win situation. I think that's what African leaders are actually going for. Which collaboration would allow the continent of Africa to develop and actually support sustainable development in a way that Vision 2030 can be actually applied with the development of Africa. So Africa right now is not close to any investors, but is looking for investors that will establish a win-win partnership.
Right. Now, I'd like to go back to how we started this conversation. The fact that there were so many countries engaged in this summit. Did you sense that there was, in general, they were all moving towards the same trajectory? Hello? I think we've lost. Yeah, unfortunately, we've lost Sofia there, but I think luckily we managed to get most of it. Thank you anyway, Sofia, if you can hear me. So that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Unfortunately, we lost contact with our Africa correspondent, but there's lots more coming up, so don't go away. Goodbye.